Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Rubel. So today we will learn end-to-end testing for API testing. So far in previous tutorial, we learned how to create a customer, how to retrieve customer, how to update customer, how to delete customer. So we learn individual methods. So today we'll learn how to implement all 4 requests together. So let me show you from the pie chart that what we are going to do. So as I say, right now I don't have any customer. So create a customer. So I will create a customer. So just send request. So I will create a customer. After we create a customer, I will grab this ID. After I get this ID, I will validate by using get again, get all customer before 0. So now 275. So get customer, so ID was 275. So I will grab this ID, then I will send a get request to retrieve the 275, the ID number. And after that, I will use this ID again to update the customer. So I will provide here, at the end, I will provide 275 and just update. So you see, first name, last name was update. And now at the end, what I'm going to do, use the same ID again and delete the customer. So I'm going to provide here 275. So now if I do get all again, it's empty. Okay, so this is how we did manually. So now let's bring PyCharm into program. Okay, so and I will do do a little bit of enhancement as well. So let me minimize all the window. Okay, so let me close everything. So this is my test file, right? So randomly we learn individual methods. So today I will do some organized. So the first I will test case number 1, we would say create a customer. Because why we are doing this automation? We are doing the automation either we are going to do the smoke test, regression test. So what we are going to do, if I run the smoke test, we will create a customer and update customer and the delete customer to make sure none of the functionality is broken, right? So like the create a customer, I would say test case 1, and test case 2, I would say I will retrieve the customer. So I will use the get command X. So test get customer ID. So it's gonna be test case 2. And test case 3 should be updated, so that should be fine. And test case 3 will be delete. So create, get, update, delete, and if I want to use this, like for example, after I delete the customer, right? So what customer I have delete? I delete the customer number 275. And if I want to see if the 275 again here, so customer slash 275 is given 404 error, right? So I can validate the 404 error. So that should be another validation. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to use any logic here. So it's going to be simple. And at the end, like how you check if your program or method is run, we can, at the end, we can print something, or in the future, we will also learn the log. But for now, let's print, right? So print, I would say, what should I say? Test what test case, right? TC1 is successful. I'm doing very basic, right? So for understanding, so more and in the future we are going to modify, I mean, enhance this code, when we go for complex a little bit. So test case on is successful. Like this is the message that I want to print after we run our program. So this should be test case 2. And this should be test case 3. Oh, sorry, I think I missed test case 2. This should be update customer should be 3. And this should be here. This case was successful. And I can delete this, and some of the stuff I will delete. Let me see. So this is the create a customer, and I see the JSON data. So maybe I did little, okay, let's go to the test data. Test data, let me see, this is the test data, split right. So let's go one by one. So when I say test case on create a customer, so that means it's required data, and this is the JSON data, and we know this data is coming from test data that we create. So I did, since this is the create a customer, I just, instead of JSON data, I rename it. So create a random customer data. So I can use this one. Instead of this, I can use this one. And what else I need to do? Anything else? Okay, so now let's do the configure. So this is the post, right? So we know we have a body, and each time we run, it will randomly create a user. And we also need the update. So let me see what I'm using for update customer. So this is the update customer. So that means I have a last name. So last name, I will have a Tom on. I updated to Rubel 123. Okay, so that should be fine. And also what I'm going to do, I will do the enhancement for the URL, right? So these URL, so the URL we know is in the config file. So what I did, I make a generic. So you see that before we had a we didn't have generic URL. So we can delete this. I mean, I get comments out. So we'll use this generic URL, and the endpoint we can list it under the method. So this URL I am calling here, but create a customer, we need a endpoint, right? So I say endpoint is equal, and what is the create a customer endpoint? It should be create a customer. So we have this. Now I can copy this part. I mean, I'm copying from Postman right now because I already know, like, this is the endpoint from the API documentation, right? So this is the endpoint. So now, so this is the string. Our URL also is string. So you have to do the concatenation here. So URL plus endpoint. So what we'll do right now? So it will just create a customer, and it will just print output, right? And then it will print the success message. So now let's do it again to test it out. So we should see that we are not broke. We did not break anything. And one more thing I want to do, right? So this response, I will have the customer ID, right? So how I can get the customer ID? I can get the customer ID by, so since I don't have any customers, so let's run first. Terminal set by test. So this is the ID. And as we know, this is ID is the dictionary format, right? So I need to grab this ID, and how I can retrieve that ID dictionary. What I have to do, just JSON, then ID. All right, so now if I run again, so it will create, since this is the random, right? This one will create an 277, I guess. I'm not sure. So now it should print the ID, whatever ID it will generate. So now, yeah, it generates a customer ID is 277. So now these 277, let's type like what type ID it is. So I can say type and print out. So this is the integer. So this type, so this the ID itself is an integer. So what we have to do is we have to grab this ID in the, and we are going to put in the list, because this ID has to read from test case number 2, 3, right? Let me repeat again. Our goal is to create a customer. So it has been create a customer. And after create a customer, we'll grab the customer ID. And this ID will be using by get, update, and delete that we saw in the Postman. So now, what we can do before the test, any method, we can declare one empty variable, which is the list, and whatever we get this ID, we can store there. Like this is kind of, you can say variable. So I can say customer ID is equal list. So I only put in the list. Okay, so now I have an empty list here. So now how I can add this customer ID to the, how I can add this ID that I retrieved to here. What we have to do is we have to use append. It's called, so we have to first say customer ID, which is this, right? And we say append. Append, and we don't need append what? We have to provide this ID. Remove the type. So it will retrieve the customer ID and it will append to here, the list. So now it will be like the globally can be accessed. So now what we are going to do is, and we already have the method, right? So we can use the assert here, but we will learn that later. But now what we are going to do, we are going to now grab that, use that customer ID, whatever we have it here, and use it here. Okay. So let me use it. So this is the get method, and what will be the endpoint? Get, for the get method, you will have the endpoint this one, because this is the ID specific. We are not looking all the get. We are looking for whatever ID we got in this box. Okay, so that should be the endpoint. Point equal this. Now we cannot put these 275 here, right? Because this is hard coded. We have to provide this customer, okay, customer ID. We have to provide the customer ID here. Let's put the customer ID, and we already know how to do that. So you have to say, you have to close this first, plus customer ID. And we don't need the colon here. Okay, so so we have the endpoint. We modify the endpoint. This is the customer ID that coming from here, and we just concatenate this customer ID here in order for to retrieve the customer. So now we have to provide the request.get URL plus endpoint and authentication. Everything should be fine. So now, as you see, like if the customer ID is a expected type string got list instead. So that means we cannot these expected string value, but right now the customer ID is list, right? So that's is making complaint. So it will throw an error, and we say type error can only concatenate string, not list, right? So that means we cannot concatenate the list with the list, with the string. So we know this is the string. So we have to add, in order for to concatenate it, we also need a string. So now what do we have to do? We have to convert this customer ID into customer ID, the list into a string. So now let Google it. Like I previous before I start video, I just Google it, like how to convert list to string Python. So you will have a ton of information. So I like one of them here, the Stack Overflow, and let me go scroll down. So you can use whatever is suitable for your program. So I like this one. No, this one is the multiple list. Which one is that? Yeah, we can use this also, multiple list. We can use the join. Looks like it's not this one. Anyway, so we can use this, like we get the ID, like the one ID is the list. So we can say dot, we have to use the dot join method, then map, then we have to say string and whatever we get, right? So we can just copy this whole thing, come back to our program, and under this endpoint, I mean before that, before. And so this is, I would say list to string. Okay, so list to string. So now what do we have to do? Leave everything as is, and customer ID, right? So you have a customer ID here, just copy this customer ID and paste it here. And this list to string now become a string. So now if I copy and paste it here, now there is no complaint. Everything is working fine. So now we don't, since we already say customer ID, right? So this is the customer ID, so we don't need this variable, we can delete. So now if I run, it should run successfully. You see, no error, test case 2 successful. We are continue to our test case number 3 for update the customer. So we are going to use the same ID, right, from the test case number 2. So I can, let's uncomment this. And we can copy this line because we need this ID. And we can copy, let me see. The first copy this line. And update customer, we can put it here. And we need the endpoint. Endpoint for update customer. So let me see the endpoint for update customer. So the endpoint, so at the end, we have to provide the list of customers. So that should be fine then. So list of customer, everything is similar. So let me provide the URL plus endpoint. And we are going to also print the ID here as well. So ID also I can print the JSON complete. For now, I'll print the complete JSON to see that update, right? My first name, I mean, the last name should be update. So now let's run it. So let me see test case 1, ID is 293, test case 2, ID 293, then test case 3, 293, which is update customer. And here I should see my last name, Rubel. All right, so it's updated. Okay, so now we are going to delete this customer. So let me uncomment this again. And same thing, we are going to use from list. Let me copy this and list to string. Let me see the endpoint for the delete. So, okay, we have a force is equal to true, right? So that means we will have the number here, right? Customer, and this number will be there. What do we have to do? Just add this question mark, force is equal to true, copy. And how we can add the string? I have to say plus, and this string, this. So this is the URL, the endpoint. So the base URL should be URL plus endpoint and status code. Let me see the status code. What is the status code for delete the customer? Oh, let me see. Favorite customer, get all customers. Okay, so delete so 288. Let me delete 288. So status code is 200. So I can verify the assert status is 200. And also, I don't need to print JSON here because the customer will be deleted anyway, right? I mean, it will display like what the details was deleted. So we are done. Delete the customer. And now if I run, I don't have to print this thing, right? So just remove this part. Run. See, test case 4 is also successful. So now after delete, right, we can also run the get again. This whole thing again to verify. So what we are saying, so it is a test case number 5. We can do the validation here itself, but I just, since we are learning from the basic, right? So we would say get customer ID. Okay, customers should not exist, or remove successful, right? You can name it anything you want, but okay. So what I'm saying here, so after delete, I'm saying, okay, go and grab this customer, whatever ID we have, and print the customer ID. So it will throw an error because it's not, the ID will not be available, and this will not print. Okay, so let me run. So you see key error. So we can provide the logic here, but that's the idea, right? That customer should not exist. So also we can provide the assert command. So let me get our customer. If the customer not exist, right? So let me see 1, 2, 2. Just get all customers. So 404, right? Status code should be 404. So I can just say, oops, let me print the last comment. And this is 5. This case, this is 5. And I would say assert. And r dot status code is equal to 404. Okay, so now run again. See, everything is fine. But if I change the status code to 1 or 200, success, right? If I say 200, it should say expected is 404, but found. Expected is 404, but found 200. Okay, so you got the idea. So this is like without using any for loop or logic, like if else that we learn, right? Without using anything, we can simply just write our smoke test, and every time the build is happening, we can run these soups, right? So that is, since we're learning from the basics, so we will, as time permit, we will enhance this code more efficient. Okay, thank you.